Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. And friends, welcome back. We are in Calloway County with attorney Jeff Roberts, and today we are going to be talking about trucking accidents. We've got some new data that came from the Kentucky State Police Department, and we're going to share that and get Jeff's insights on it. Jeff, how you been, guy?
Been doing good. How are you, Jim?
I'm loving it. Had a nice drive down today, and just the weather today is fantastic. So anytime we get to drive in Western Kentucky, I just absolutely love it because we both went to Murray anyway, so it's kind of like coming home.
I understand.
It's just a beautiful road.
Yes.
But hey, so let's dive into this. Every year, the Kentucky State Police issue a traffic analysis, a traffic report, traffic collision facts. But there is a lag. So the data that we're going to talk about today is actually the 2022 data. So it's, we're in 2024 now, but this is the most recent that we have. There are some other ways to get at some numbers, but this really kind of puts a nice encapsulated approach for everybody. And this is free data. You can find it on the Kentucky State Police website. But let's kind of jump into this because as we talk about tractor trailers, obviously, it's a lot of driving. A lot of people are out on the roads right now. And, we've had episode after episode where we've talked about motor vehicle. Motor vehicle accidents is a big part of your practice, right?
It is, yeah. One of the largest parts of my practice is motor vehicle collisions, whether it be a passenger car, motorcycle, or collisions involving big trucks. I've been involved where I'm suing the semi-truck driver and company, or represented the semi-truck driver when they were injured from somebody else's causing the accident as well. But any type of motor vehicle collision, I've been involved in those for greater than 30 years now, and it is a large part of my practice.
What's interesting is I look back at the podcast. I mean, this is episode 80 that we're actually recording. So we've got a lot of episodes out there about motor vehicle issues. I mean, we do every spring, we do a nice motorcycle tip. We have spoken most definitely about farm implements and farm equipment on the roadways. Western Kentucky is a rural area. We've always got that. We've got people pulling boats to the lake, and I think either episode 78 or 79 dealt with that specifically. So I love the fact that you dive in and you kind of explain, not only the fact that you handle these areas of practice, these areas of law, these types of injuries, but also giving people some insights behind it so they can be a little safer, and we'll reference those previous episodes and things to consider and deal with when we are out on the road. So I guess today we're going to jump into some good data from the Kentucky State Police.
Exactly. Yeah, I hope for the podcast to be informational to the people who listen. Anyone who needs assistance, they can go on and hopefully find some information that they find beneficial or helpful from that standpoint. And frankly, I'm especially on the ones where we give tips, I hope they help people avoid having collisions, because while that's what I help people out who've been involved in collisions, I would much prefer to see a lot fewer collisions out on the roadway than what we do have in Kentucky now.
Well, speaking of roadways, on page 10 of this report for the Kentucky State Police, we have collisions on interstates and parkways, so we can kind of break that down. It's really kind of shocking when you look at the numbers and how they group. It's interesting.
It is, and some of it's not very surprising to me when you look at I-24 for the year 2022. There are 777 vehicle collisions, but then when you look at the map of I-20 of Kentucky and see I-24, I-24 comes into Kentucky in the Christian County area, Oak Grove, Hopkinsville area, comes in there and then exits in Paducah there. So it's really not a huge section of Kentucky where I-24 travels through. So for it being such a small section of the roadway that actually is in Kentucky, for it having 777 collisions during that year, that actually seems fairly high to me. Because if you look at some of these other roadways, you take I-65, for instance, which travels a much longer distance through Kentucky, and it has higher numbers, 2,381 in that area, but it also travels through major metropolitan area. It travels through Louisville, so you're going to expect to see higher. It travels through Bowling Green as well, so you would kind of expect it. Interstates that travel through more populated areas through the bigger cities are going to have more collisions involved there as well. Now, I-69, which travels a longer distance through Kentucky than 24, but it does somewhat meander through rural areas, and its numbers are lower, I think, in part because of that. It's only 273 collisions from there. And of course, we have several parkways in western Kentucky. The area I primarily practice, with I handle cases all over the state, but primarily western Kentucky is my region there. And they've changed all the names of the parkways from what they were when I first started practicing when I was younger. The Pennyroyal Parkway is now the Edward T. Breathitt Parkway, but it had 176 collisions there. And of course, that's I suspect since you went to Murray State here, you're familiar with that. But it goes from Hopkinsville, Madisonville, and to Henderson. There, the Purchase Parkway over, which Graves County up to Kentucky Lake area, which is also now part of the of I-69. So I don't really know if they're how they're calculating this, because Purchase Parkway is part of I-69 now. But it had 150 crashes on it, and then the West Kentucky Parkway, which is a long, boring parkway that I drive more fairly frequently anyway, and had 283 on that. But again, like these travel through rural areas, so even though they may be longer, they just don't have as, even though they sometimes have a lot of vehicle traffic, they don't have as much traffic, so they have a little lower collision count.
Well, I think the one thing that stands out to me, though, is, and this may be an anomaly for 2022, is that the Western Kentucky Parkway actually had the highest number of collisions of all the parkways at 283. Unfortunately, 5 fatalities resulted from that, and 80 people injured. It's really kind of an interesting dynamic that, Western Kentucky, yes, it's rural, but there's still a lot going on there in terms of collisions, specifically in this year. But when you group the Pennyroyal, the Purchase, and the Western Kentucky all together, that's a significant number of the collisions that occurred actually in Kentucky, in our Commonwealth here.
Oh, yes, it is. I think you, especially when you, like in Louisville, I don't know that there is a parkway that travels through the Louisville area. At least there's none listed on here that I see. So a lot of these parkways are going to be through the more rural areas. The one that surprised me is Bluegrass. I've traveled to Bluegrass a lot, and I really thought the numbers would have been higher on the Bluegrass Parkway between Elizabethtown and Lexington, because it just seems to me to always have more traffic on it than I do see on the West Kentucky. But the West Kentucky travels a lot longer distance as well, and that could be part of it, because if I'm not mistaken, I think the West Kentucky Parkway is over 300 miles. No, can't be over 300 miles, can it?
I don't think so, but then again, I'm not looking at a map, so
no,
it feels every bit of 300
it feels
miles.
like 300 miles. I agree with you, but I was thinking the exit numbers around Elizabethtown are in the 300s, or no, 130. That's what I'm saying.
I'll text you tonight.
130, about 137 miles. I'm being dyslexic on my first number there. And so, so it is a very long parkway. Maybe some of these others may be longer, but it's the longest parkway that I'm aware of. Now, Mountain Parkway and some of the others could be a little longer, because I just don't travel those, so I don't know.
Well, I tell you, the one thing, we come down here every month, and I've noticed just a lot of truck traffic on the roads these days. And sometimes it seems like, there's a pretty good amount of tractor trailer traffic that, sometimes you don't expect it, but when there's construction, in fact, we've got some construction going over by Grand Rivers right now where they're doing a lot of work. And, traffic stops suddenly. There's a lot of other factors that come in. And I want to refer people back to a previous episode. This was all the way back in episode 20, where we talked about safe driving tips around traffic trailers, tractor trailers. The issue is, again, stopping distances, startup distances, turn radiuses, people not giving the trucks, I hate to say just driving nicely, give them some extra room because they're going to need it. You might need some room. I see people zipping over in front of these trucks all the time. I'm like, what are you thinking? It's an accident waiting to happen sometimes.
Yeah, it is. Semis take a lot longer to maneuver on a roadway than a passenger vehicle does, and they take longer to stop as well. And I've seen it where people will, their rear bumper barely clears the front bumper of the semi, and then they pull right back in front of the semi in heavy traffic. And if you pull back in front of the semi and then you have to stop because traffic in front of you stopping, that can cause problems because that semi cannot stop nowhere near as fast as your passenger vehicle is going to be able to stop, regardless of whether the semi is loaded or unloaded. If it's unloaded, it's going to stop quicker than loaded, but it's not going to stop as quick as a passenger vehicle no matter what from that standpoint. So you have to be careful when you are around semis, give them a wide berth. But by the same token, semi drivers need to also show that exact same courtesy to the other traveling public as well.
I agree. And actually, you talked about collisions and traffic there. I'd like to refer the listeners back to episode 63, where we specifically spoke about multiple vehicle collisions. A lot of times, if you've got a tractor trailer behind one car, it's going to slam that car into a car in front of it, and so on and so forth. So, again, a lot of terrific information on this podcast. I hope people take advantage of that. When they're looking for, okay, I've been in this kind of a situation, I've been in this kind of collision, I need some help. This is a good way to figure out kind of how Jeff thinks about things, how he approaches things, and what it might be like to actually engage with Jeff and hire him. Jeff, on that topic, what is the easiest way for people to contact you? I mean, you do have an office in Murray, Calloway County. That's where we are today. But you've also got one up in Hopkinsville, up in Christian County. But what is the best way for somebody to get a hold of you while they're listening to this?
The best way to reach me is to call the office. The phone number is 270-753-0053. I do have an office in Murray and Hopkinsville, as you said, but that number will reach me. If I am at the Hopkinsville office and you call that number, they can get in touch with me so that I can return the phone call. If I'm available to talk with you right then, I can talk with you then. So that's the best way to reach out to me.
Outstanding. Well, Jeff, let's jump back into this report if we could, and I'm going to direct us to page 33, which is specifically talking about trucking accidents. When you get into trucking collisions, and it really breaks it down. So again, we're referencing the Kentucky State Police report, and this is the 2022 data. Total truck collisions were 9,437 collisions. 86 of them were fatal, unfortunately. Just over 1,300 injury collisions, and almost 2,000 people totally that were injured. That's a lot of people.
Yes.
That's a lot of families. That's a lot of injuries. That's a lot of medical bills, and some of these obviously the fatal collisions, but they're life changing for the entire family.
They are injuries, and when you're talking, we've had the conversation before with motorcycles. I've ridden motorcycles most of my adult life, and if you're on a motorcycle, unfortunately, you're more likely to have a more serious injury in the same accident than somebody in the passenger vehicle is likely to have. The same holds true to some extent. If you're in an accident with a tractor trailer or semi, if you're struck by one of those vehicles, you're more likely to have a more serious injury, at least in my experience, than a more serious injury as a result of that collision than if the same collision had occurred between two passenger vehicles. That's just been my experience from that standpoint. And when you look at these numbers with the number of collisions involving big trucks or semis, and then the fatal collisions being 86, but then you go down to the total number of people who died, and it's 96 that died. So in some of these, you've had multiple fatalities. Unfortunately, you don't want any fatalities or any serious injuries, but having multiple fatalities in the same accident. And I think I suspect you're going to see that occur more frequently in semi-truck collisions than you will in other types of collisions.
I think so. The one thing that this chart does a really nice job of is it isolates truck collisions themselves, and it talks about some of the driver contributing factors. And this stuff is just astounding. I mean, just over 200 collisions were due to distracted driving, and that could be a number of things. But these guys are licensed. They have a CDL license, and so they have a higher responsibility. There are specific laws and under motor. I think it's the Motor Carrier Act. Is that what it's called, Jeff? But all of this,
yeah.
all of these different regulations that come into play, and you've still got just in Kentucky in 1 year, just over 200 collisions because the driver was distracted.
Right, under the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Act. You have certain conditions placed on CDL drivers that you don't have on just a normal operator's license from that. But and distracted driving is, unfortunately, that's a leading cause of accidents in that regard. But when you look at the numbers from this, and I'm looking at a couple of different pages on this, but the page 33, where you're talking about you had 9,437 total collisions. And then on another page, page 17, it talks about collisions that were caused by by a problem with the vehicle itself, tire failure, overloading or improper loading of the load, and other conditions like that. Well, that accounted for a total of 666 of these total collisions. So the vast majority of these collisions, unfortunately, are driver error in that regard. And so when you have that, and that's part of the reason, because these vehicles can cause so much damage and so much injury. That is the reason, one of the reasons for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Act, that it puts restrictions on drivers to help limit driver fatigue and distraction. Distracted driving can be a couple of things. A lot of people think of, you're texting and driving, or looking at your phone and driving, and that certainly is a big part of the distracted driving aspect of it. But fatigue comes into play, not just in distracted driving, but just fatigue in general. And falling asleep is one of the categories listed here as well, and all of those. And that's the reason, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Act puts limitations on semi-truck drivers, CDL drivers, from that standpoint. They're not supposed to drive more than 11 hours after, and supposed to be off 10 consecutive hours before they drive the 11 hours. And then in a 7-day period, they're not supposed to drive more than 60 hours in a 7-day period, or 70 hours in an 8-day period. And so they've got, and these are general guidelines that they put in place. There's exceptions to these, and like during COVID, I know they suspended some of these and all of that because they wanted to get material around hurricanes and things like that. They sometimes suspend these restrictions, so it varies time to time in the specifics of the case. But as a general rule, these are what CDL drivers are having to follow, and that is they're supposed to follow these and keep the detailed logbooks to make sure that they are following these, so we can determine that they are, because they know fatigue is a huge factor in causing wrecks. And can affect, it's not just, they list fatigue, but then in another spot they talk about overcorrecting or inattention, and improper turning. All of those can be as a result of fatigue. Failure to brake in time. That could be part of a fatigue issue, even though it's listed separately here. And that is, I know that's the reason for these regulations, to keep the drivers to where they're not as fatigued when they're driving down the roadway. And it's good, and all the drivers should be following these. Some of the logs now are electronic, but that's where an attorney that's familiar with these regulations and familiar with the rules come into play, because sometimes these can be fudged by the drivers and by the companies. So you need to be able to determine if a wreck occurs. You need to be able to determine if that's what happens.
Some of that kind of forensic approach that you guys take to gathering up all of the evidence and really kind of preserving that evidence and making sure that you guys have time to analyze what actually did happen here, because again, there's probably a catastrophic injury involved. It may not be a fatality, but again, if you're involved with a large truck like this, it's probably going to be catastrophic, unfortunately, and there's going to be a lot of issues and a lot of expenses, a lot of surgeries, a lot of time recuperating. It's going to be just devastating.
Yes, frequently it is, and that's where an attorney familiar with these type of cases comes in. It is who you need to have, because they're familiar with the laws in that regard, but also because they're familiar with the proper experts and some of the better experts, to get them involved as soon as possible to go look at the vehicle to see if there was a vehicle problem. If it hadn't been properly maintained, the brakes hadn't been properly maintained and they failed, tires hadn't been properly maintained, and you had a tire failure that caused the collision, and that opens up potential additional people that are responsible for this collision. If it's driver error, you need to document that driver error. If they falsified the documents, you need to be able to establish that and prove that as well. So, it's almost guaranteed that if there is a serious injury in one of these collisions or fatality, and even if it's not, if you've got a high property damage, that trucking company and the insurance company for that trucking company is going to have an expert on scene usually within 24 hours, but certainly within 48 hours.
Well, I tell you, coming back to this chart, I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion on this page that 205 of the collisions involved distraction. As I look further down, 3,191 were attributed to inattention. So I don't know what the difference between distraction and inattention is, but that's a lot of collisions.
Yes.
Because you're just not paying attention necessarily. What kind of surprises me is toward the top of the page there's there's a log of exceeding the stated speed limit was only 58. That was only 58 reasons or contributing factors, I guess, 58. But when you look a little bit further down and you see too fast for the conditions, that could be, okay, it's rainy out, there's ice on the road, maybe during wintertime. And even though the speed limit says 70 or 55, this is a truck moving too fast for the road conditions.
Exactly. If that's exactly what that is. The exceeding the posted speed limit is one thing, and then so if it's a 70 mile and they're running 80, it's going to come down from that standpoint. But if there's been rain and you're on a road that's got curves in it, and they're running 70 mile an hour on a road that's got a decent sized curve on it, they're even though it's an interstate with a 70 mile an hour speed limit, that can be a problem for a semi or a car, even for that matter. You need, and you're required by law to decrease your speed based on road conditions. So if the roads are wet, the roads are icy, you've got to decrease your speed to account for that.
Some of that seems like common sense, but when you have a very large truck that's loaded down, just the stopping distances, the reaction time, if you're drowsy because you've been driving too long, all of these factors make this thing a dangerous vehicle to operate. And unfortunately, a lot of families in Kentucky bear the brunt of that negligence. And I think when that happens, that's one of the reasons, as you stated earlier, you need to get in touch with an attorney who really has experience dealing, not just with car wrecks, but dealing with tractor-trailer accidents. And that's been a part of your practice. I mean, you've been involved in some of these, especially in rural Western Kentucky, where we have a lot of roadways and a lot of cargo, a lot of everything else going through these roadways, going across these roadways at high rates of speed. Down here we used to call it Muddy State because of all the rain that we used to get when I was attending. So, so the traffic conditions, the road conditions become a factor as well.
Oh, exactly. And you see the semis in this area, delivering goods to stores out in rural areas, so they get on smaller roadways, not just the interstates and the parkways, but you see them on the highways. Highway 80 has a lot of semi traffic between Bowling Green through Hopkinsville down to Mayfield. There, and it gets a lot of traffic on it, but then even on the two lanes, Highway 94, 121, and various other highways that travel throughout this area, and so you see those vehicles on those roads as well, and and those are the ones where I think you're going to, especially to some extent, because you're going to have a two-lane road's going to have a lot sharper curves than a four-lane road is going to have. And so if you've got a semi driving down Highway 94, for instance, that there are some curves on Highway 94 that you've got to slow down pretty good on, and if you don't, even in passenger car, you're going to have difficulty. But if you're in a semi, that can cause result in a load shift. It can result in the vehicle, if it's wet pavement, sliding and things of that nature. So driving based on the condition and based on the vehicle you're driving and paying attention is a big factor in avoiding collisions.
Well, I think on some of these smaller roads, you're probably local. That's why you're driving on those roads. You probably live in the area, or at least, maybe not right down the road here, but you've driven these roads before. A lot of these truckers are not from the local area. So, not only are they dealing with a situation that they're unfamiliar with, they just don't understand what's going on or what's coming up around the next bend. And again, all of these other factors can combine to cause just very tragic situations. Jeff, we talked about how people can call you, obviously, but one of the things people worry about when they need to get an attorney involved is the cost of hiring an attorney. We've done episodes talking specifically about contingency fee arrangements and how that works. Do you want to explain to people? Because yes, I might need to obviously hire an attorney, but I'm worried about what it costs. In an injury case, it's handled much differently.
It is, and I have people frequently ask me how much it costs to come in to talk with me for the initial appointment, and then ask if they got to pay a retainer for me to take on their case. And I handle cases on a contingency fee cases. Any type of motor vehicle collision, I'm handling that case on a contingency fee. And what that means is that my fee is contingent upon me being successful for the client. So when they come in to see me for that first visit, there are no costs. They don't pay me a retainer fee. I don't get paid in that case until the end of the case when I'm putting money in my client's pocket. That's when I receive a fee at that point in time. The fee's a percentage of the recovery I obtain. So the better I do for the client, the better I do for myself. So I have an incentive to do the best for my client in that regard as well. I've got a financial incentive to do that. Also, that's just my makeup anyway. I want to do the best for the people I represent. If you look on the website and other places, my motto is to provide small town service and deliver big city results. And I try to live up to that motto. So that's the reason, or that's the way I handle things. And it's not just the attorney fee that is contingent upon recovery. I mentioned earlier about getting experts involved. Experts are very expensive. I advance that cost as well. The clients don't have to pay me any money up front to cover experts or to cover the expenses that I'm going to incur in representing them. That is also dealt with at the end when I put money in my client's pocket. That's when I get reimbursed my expenses at that point. But the expenses are also contingent upon recovery. So if we're not successful, the client's not out of pocket any money for my representation. They don't pay me an attorney fee. They don't pay me reimbursement of my expenses either in that regard. That's which is another strong incentive to do a really good job for my clients, because I don't get paid if I don't.
And that's, again, the good thing about a contingency fee, and we talked about this in the previous episodes, is it allows people to pursue their cases. And it's not just law for the rich. It's the people who are actually in a situation and they need someone who's experienced. You've got over 32 years of practicing right here in Western Kentucky. You know the roadways, you know the people, you know the judges, you know all of this. the stuff that goes into, not only the science of practicing law, but also the art of practicing law. And somebody that can just pick up the phone and speak with you directly, I think that makes a difference. I think that makes a big difference because, again, you're from this area, and it's just there's a bond there. I've gone out, I've looked at the reviews that you have on your Google reviews, and just comment after comment after comment about how you treated people, how you took on the burden of the case, but you also kept them up to date. You communicated well, which is a big issue with a lot of your colleagues, unfortunately. But there's just comment after comment about how you have run this practice for so many years, and I appreciate it. I know your clients certainly do.
Well, and there is a thing. Murray, where I practice, has been voted in the past, and I don't know how long we kept it, but the friendliest small town in America at one time. And frankly, it's that way. There's a thing in Western Kentucky, and you hear Southern hospitality, and that is definitely a thing in Western Kentucky, and I think throughout most of Kentucky, if not all of Kentucky, from that standpoint. But that I try to treat people the way I want to be treated. I think that's the way we should treat people. And as far as the contingent fee, when you mentioned that, the contingent fee allows the courthouse doors to be opened for everyone, not just folks who have a lot of money and insurance companies and corporations who have a lot of money. There's been efforts in the past by insurance companies to try to eliminate or significantly put restrictions on attorneys handling cases on a contingency fee basis, because they know those companies know that if the courthouse doors aren't open for the people who've been injured by their products or by the negligent drivers, then the corporations and the insurance companies' profits are going to be greater from that standpoint. So they don't want the courthouse doors open. The contingency fee is one of the reasons courthouse doors are open for those, for everyone, especially for the ones who aren't rich.
Exactly. And Jeff, as we wrap this up, the one thing I do want to encourage people to do, especially if you have been in a trucking accident here in Western Kentucky, it costs you nothing to call Jeff. It costs you nothing to get some qualified information from an attorney who knows the area, who knows these types of cases. And I'm going to ask you, please, consider picking up the phone and at least getting some direction so you know some options and you can feel comfortable. There is somebody here locally who is not some giant advertising firm, who rather focuses on each case, each individual, each family, and does his utmost best to get that case resolved successfully. And I just, again, Jeff, I know as an attorney there are certain things you can't say, but I certainly can say it about you because I've known you for many years. And again, just anybody that reads those Google reviews, if you go to Murray, if you go to Google and type in Robert's Law Office, Murray, Kentucky, you're going to see review after review. And again, I think that's a credit. That's not something that you wrote. That's something your clients wrote about you. And those reviews are absolutely earned.
Well, I appreciate that. And if you do have questions, if you've been involved in a wreck with a semi or any other motor vehicle wreck for that matter that you have questions about, please feel free to call, and we will look at it and try our best to see what we can do for you.
You always do. You always do. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. I know you spent a half an hour with us here, and I know some of this information was kind of common sense, but again, that's how we always approach these podcasts, is we want to be able to break down big issues in the law and make it understandable, because again, it's a complex area, and when you're dealing with a truck crash, a motor vehicle accident, they're complex. They are complicated, a lot of moving parts, obviously, and we want to try to make it understandable so that you realize, hey, there's a local resource, and if you need it, by all means, give them a call. We'll be back in about 2 weeks. Jeff, thanks for your time, guy.
Thank you.
See you. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.